Don't let her make decisions. She's too old to understand. Those words weren't whispered. They were said right there at the foot of my hospital bed, as if I couldn't hear, as if I wasn't even present in my own life. Hello, my name is Agnes Whitford, and I'm 74 years old. Before I begin this story, I'd like to ask, where are you watching from? Let me know, because stories like mine aren't just mine. They belong to every person who's ever felt underestimated, dismissed, or treated like a burden simply because of age. Now, let me take you back to the moment everything shifted. I was in the hospital for what was supposed to be a routine procedure, a hip treatment. Nothing life-threatening, nothing that would have stripped me of my sense of self. I was alert, clear-headed, and very much aware of what was happening around me. Yet the way my son Daniel and his wife Marlene behaved, you'd think I was already halfway gone. The nurse had come in with a clipboard, asking me to review some consent papers. Nothing complicated. Standard forms you sign before they move forward with a procedure. I had the pen in my hand when I heard Marlene's sharp whisper, meant only for the nurse, but echoing loud enough for me to catch. Don't let her make decisions. She's too old to understand. The nurse looked awkward, glancing between me and them, as though I'd suddenly vanished from the room. Daniel chimed in, his voice heavy with the kind of false patience he often used when speaking to me these days. Yeah, Mum gets overwhelmed with this kind of stuff. It's better if we handle it. Handle it. The way you handle a broken appliance or a piece of property. Not a person. Not me. I set the pen down slowly and looked at them. My heart beat hard, not from fear, but from the raw sting of humiliation. They were my family, my blood, the people I'd raised and nurtured, and here they were, speaking about me like I was incapable of tying my own shoes. The nurse cleared her throat, obviously uncomfortable. Mrs. Whitford, she said gently, do you feel comfortable signing these yourself? I straightened my back. My hands may have been wrinkled, my body slower than it used to be, but my mind was still sharp as ever. Of course I can, I replied, my voice steady, though I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks. I know exactly what I'm signing. Marlene gave a little laugh, tight and condescending. We're just trying to help, Agnes. It's not a big deal. But it was a big deal. It was more than a big deal. Because in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't just about hospital papers. This was about control. It was about them deciding I no longer had a voice. That night, lying in the stiff hospital bed, I replayed those words over and over in my head. Too old to understand. What an label for them to stick on me. It justified everything they wanted, my finances, my house, my decisions, neatly tied up under the excuse of helping Mum. But I wasn't ready to be managed. I wasn't ready to be erased. The truth is, Daniel and Marlene had been circling around this for months, maybe even years. They'd drop hints about how much work it was for me to keep up with the house. They'd offer to take over paying bills, so I wouldn't have to stress. They even suggested I move in with them, which on the surface might sound generous, but I knew better. They wanted access. Access to my bank accounts, my property, the little nest egg I'd spent a lifetime building. Still, hearing it out loud, spoken to a nurse as if I were nothing but a child to be managed, lit a fire inside me. I stared at the ceiling long after the hospital ward had gone quiet, and a thought settled in my mind like a stone. If I didn't do something now, they would take everything from me. It wasn't paranoia. It was clarity. I'd seen the way Daniel's eyes lingered when he looked at my home. I'd seen the way Marlene's lips curled when she mentioned simplifying things for me. No, I wasn't too old to understand. I was finally beginning to understand exactly who they were and what I needed to do to protect myself. That was the night I made a silent promise to myself. I would not let my children strip me of dignity, of voice, of control. I had carried them through sleepless nights, put food on their plates when I often went without, and fought for them to have the lives they now enjoyed. If they thought I was going to sit quietly and let them take mine away, they were about to learn how wrong they were. When I was discharged from the hospital a few days later, Daniel was the one who came to pick me up. He carried my bag to the car, opened the door, and put on the same smile he used to charm people at work. To a stranger, it might have looked like care. To me, it felt like calculation. The drive home was quiet at first. I stared out the window, watching the winter trees blur past. Then, casually, as though he were mentioning the weather, Daniel said, "Mum, it might be time we start thinking about some paperwork, just so everything is organized. You shouldn't have to worry about bills, taxes, or all that confusing stuff." I didn't answer right away. My fingers twisted in my lap. Finally, I said, "I've been paying my own bills for over 50 years. I think I can handle a few more." His jaw tightened, but he kept his voice calm. "It's not about handling it. It's about convenience. For you." The word convenience sat heavy in the car. I knew who it would really be convenient for, and it wasn't me. 2 days later, Marlene showed up at my house with a folder. She was dressed neatly, her hair perfectly styled, her perfume strong enough to sting my nose. She carried the folder like it was nothing more than recipes she wanted me to try. "Agnes," she began sweetly, setting the folder on my coffee table. "Daniel and I were talking, and we thought it might be best to simplify things for you. That way, you can relax and enjoy yourself. No stress, no worry." She slid the papers toward me. I didn't even have to read the header to know what they were. Durable power of attorney. I looked at her, trying to keep my expression neutral. "What exactly do these papers do?" "Oh, nothing complicated," she said, waving her hand like it was all routine. "It just lets Daniel handle your finances, property, medical choices, the boring details. You won't have to lift a finger." I raised an eyebrow. "So I won't have to lift a finger? Or have a voice?" Her smile faltered for the briefest second. Then it returned, too bright, too rehearsed. "You'd still have a say, of course. It's just smoother this way." I didn't reply. I opened the folder, not to read it. My eyes skimmed past the dense paragraphs, but to buy myself time. And as I pretended to scan the words, my mind went back to a dozen smaller incidents over the last few years. Like the time Daniel borrowed my car for a weekend and returned it with scratches, insisting I must have forgotten where I parked it. Or when Marlene asked to hold on to one of my credit cards for emergencies and somehow racked up charges at boutiques I'd never stepped foot in. Or when Daniel suggested selling my old piano, saying it took up too much space, though I knew Marlene had her eyes on the cash it would bring. Piece by piece, they'd been testing how far they could push me. And now, here it was, the final push. I closed the folder gently and set it back on the table. "I'll think about it," I said. Marlene leaned forward, lowering her voice like we were conspiring together. "Agnes, you don't need to think about it. Everyone does this eventually. It's safer, smarter. Don't let pride get in the way." Pride. That's what she thought this was about. Pride? I smiled thinly. "If it's as simple and harmless as you say, then you won't mind giving me time. I'll have my lawyer look it over." For the first time, her mask cracked. "Your lawyer?" she repeated. "Yes," I said, standing slowly, using my cane for balance. "Mr. Jacobs from church. He's been a friend of mine for years. I'll have him explain it to me." Marlene's face hardened. She gathered the folder with a snap, clutching it to her chest. "Of course. Whatever you want." But her voice was tight, sharp around the edges. That night, I called Mr. Jacobs. His warm, steady voice was a balm after the day's tension. "Agnes," he said after I explained everything, "do not sign anything. Power of attorney can be a useful tool, yes, but in the wrong hands, it's dangerous. You're not overreacting. If your children are pushing this hard, it's because they want control, not because they want to help." I sat there with the phone pressed against my ear, my heart thudding. It was one thing to suspect. It was another to have it confirmed. Then what do I do? I asked quietly. You choose carefully, he said. If you want to appoint someone, make sure it's someone you truly trust, someone who sees you, not your assets. As I hung up the phone, a thought sparked in the back of my mind. Someone who saw me, not my assets. Someone who had defended me when no one else would. My lips curved into the smallest of smiles. I knew exactly who that someone might be. The next morning, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of tea cooling between my palms. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that pressed against your ears and made every thought louder. Mr. Jacobs' words from the night before echoed in my mind. Choose carefully. Someone who sees you, not your assets. I thought of Daniel and Marlene, how their eyes glittered when money was mentioned, how they spoke over me as if I were already invisible. I thought of my younger daughter, long gone now, and how she used to defend me against their sharp tongues. My chest ached when I remembered her laugh, the way she'd call me the strongest woman in the room. And then my mind drifted to her son, Jacob. Not my lawyer Jacob, but Jacob Jr., my 12-year-old grandson, my late daughter's boy. I remembered a moment, not long ago, when I had been fumbling with the groceries on the front steps. My cane slipped, the bags nearly spilled, and before Daniel could even bother to glance up from his phone, Jacob Jr. had rushed over. His skinny arms grabbed the bags, his face red with effort. You shouldn't have to carry this alone, Grandma, he'd said, puffing out his chest. That small gesture had stayed with me, and there was another memory, even sharper. One Christmas, Marlene had laughed about my old-fashioned way of setting the table. Honestly, Agnes, do you even know how to fold a napkin properly anymore? She had said, loud enough for everyone to hear. The table had gone quiet, the kind of silence filled with discomfort and hidden smirks. But Jacob Jr., only 10 at the time, had slammed his little hands on the table and declared, Grandma's table looks perfect. She's the smartest person I know. I could still see his flushed cheeks, the way his eyes darted nervously afterward. But he hadn't backed down. That boy had more courage at 10 than some adults have in a lifetime. When I called Mr. Jacobs back that afternoon, my voice didn't shake. I know who I want to appoint, I told him. He paused, his tone cautious. All right. Who is it? My grandson, Jacob. There was silence on the line. Then he asked carefully, How old is he now? 12. Another pause. Agnes. Legally, he's too young to act as power of attorney by himself. But, his tone shifted, more thoughtful now, we could create a structure. I could serve as co-trustee until he comes of age. You'd still be in charge as long as you're capable. If anything happens, Jacob would inherit that responsibility under my guidance. A rush of relief spread through me. That's exactly what I want, I said. I could almost hear him smile through the phone. Then let's put it in writing. Ironclad. They won't be able to touch it. That week, we met in his office. The walls smelled faintly of old books and polished wood, the shelves lined with neat rows of law volumes. He walked me through every line of the document. I insisted on understanding every detail, not because I doubted him, but because I wanted to look Daniel in the eye later and know exactly what I had done. We set it up carefully. I retained full decision-making power while I was sound of mind. If I became incapacitated, Mr. Jacobs would step in as trustee until Jacob Jr. reached legal age. After that, the boy would inherit not just my estate, but the authority to safeguard it. When I left the office, a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying slid off my shoulders. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like I had taken back control. That evening, Jacob Jr. came to visit with his father. While his dad chatted idly in the living room, Jacob sat with me in the kitchen, his feet swinging under the chair. Grandma, he said between bites of the cookie I'd given him, are you okay? Mum says you're, getting forgetful. I looked at him closely. His eyes were wide, open, honest, the kind of eyes you couldn't lie to. "Do I seem forgetful to you?" I asked softly. He shook his head vigorously. "No. You remember everything. You even know when I sneak cookies." I laughed, but inside, my throat tightened. That simple trust, that unshaken faith, it was more precious than any amount of money. I leaned closer, lowering my voice. "Someday, Jacob, I'll need you to help me with important things. Do you think you can do that?" His little chest puffed up again, just like the day with the groceries. "Of course I can." I placed my hand over his. Then it settled. He didn't know the full weight of what I meant. Not yet. But one day, he would. I went to bed that night, with a calm I hadn't felt in a long while. Daniel and Marlene thought they were clever, circling like vultures. They believed they would corner me, break me, and walk away with everything I had built. What they didn't know was that I had already placed my future into hands much smaller, but infinitely more trustworthy than theirs. And when they found out, I knew their carefully built tower of entitlement would come crashing down. It didn't take long for Daniel and Marlene to circle back. Their confidence had grown bolder since my hospital stay, as though they believed one brush with surgery had knocked the sense right out of me. A week later, Daniel called. His tone was light, rehearsed, the way it always was when he was preparing to get something out of me. "Mum," he said warmly, "Marlene and I want to have you over for dinner this Saturday. Just family. We can finally settle all this paperwork and move forward. No stress, no arguments. Just a smooth transition." A smooth transition. I almost laughed. They thought the transition was already theirs to control. "Of course," I said, my voice calm. "Saturday works." When I arrived, the dining table was set with Marlene's usual flair. White tablecloth, crystal glasses, candles flickering in polished silver holders. She loved creating the illusion of elegance, as though the table itself proved her importance. Daniel greeted me with a kiss on the cheek, his smile too wide, too sure. Marlene was already pouring wine, humming as if we were celebrating. "To smooth transitions," Daniel said, raising his glass once we were seated. "To family taking care of family." I clinked my glass gently against his. "Yes," I replied softly, "to family." Halfway through dinner, when the plates were cleared and the candles burned low, Daniel leaned back in his chair. He reached under the table, producing a familiar folder, the same one Marlene had brought to my house. "Mum," he said, sliding it across the polished wood toward me. "We've updated everything. All you need to do is sign, and from then on, you won't have to worry about a thing." I rested my hand on the folder, but I didn't open it. Instead, I looked at him steadily. "You're right," I said. "I don't have to worry about a thing, because everything has already been taken care of." Marlene's fork clattered against her plate. "What do you mean?" Just then, there was a knock at the door. Daniel frowned, irritated at the interruption, and went to answer it. A moment later, he returned, stiff with surprise, as Mr. Jacobs stepped into the dining room carrying a leather briefcase. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Marlene's face tightened, her smile dropping like a mask ripped away. "Good evening," Mr. Jacobs said smoothly, nodding to me. "Shall we?" I gestured for him to sit. "Go ahead," I said calmly. He opened the briefcase, pulling out a thick stack of documents, neatly bound, stamped, official. He placed them in the center of the table, directly on top of Daniel's folder. "These," he said, tapping the papers with one finger, "are the finalized arrangements for Mrs. Whitford's power of attorney and estate planning." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "That's what we're here to do," he snapped. Mr. Jacobs shook his head. "No, Mr. Whitford, that's already been done." Marlene leaned forward, her knuckles white against the table. "Already done? With who?" Mr. Jacobs didn't flinch. "With me as co-trustee, and with her grandson Jacob Jr. as the named beneficiary and eventual holder of power of attorney." For a moment, the room was silent. You could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Then, "You gave it to a child?" Marlene's voice cracked into a shriek. Daniel's face flushed red, his composure shattering. "Mum, this is insane. A 12-year-old. You can't be serious." I set my glass down gently, my hand steady. Better a child who respects me than adults who treat me like I'm already dead. Daniel slammed his palm against the table, rattling the glasses. "Do you even understand what you've done? You've ruined everything." I leaned forward, my eyes fixed on his. On the contrary, for the first time in years, I've ensured that what I built, what I sacrificed for, won't be squandered by greed. Marlene's lips curled. "We'll contest this. You can't just—" Mr. Jacobs cut her off, his tone crisp. "It's airtight. Mrs. Whitford retains full authority while she's capable. If incapacitated, I step in until Jacob Jr. comes of age. The courts won't overturn it. Not when it was signed willingly, in full capacity, with legal witnesses." The blood drained from Marlene's face. Daniel stared at the documents as though they were a bomb placed in the middle of his table. I sat back, my heart oddly calm, despite the storm raging around me. "I may be 74, I said quietly, "but don't mistake years for weakness. I know exactly what I've done, and I've done it because I refuse to let my voice be silenced before I'm gone." For once, Daniel had no clever retort. He simply sat there, jaw tight, fists clenched, as the reality sank in. That dinner had been meant as their victory lap. Instead, it became the moment they realized their mother was not a pawn to be moved off the board. I had played my move, and it was checkmate. The silence that followed that dinner was louder than any argument we'd ever had. Daniel didn't call the next morning. Neither did Marlene. For 2 whole days, my phone stayed quiet, and the absence of their voices was like a heavy storm cloud building in the distance. I knew it wasn't over. People like them never accepted defeat easily. On the 3rd evening, the storm broke. Daniel showed up at my house without calling. He didn't even knock, just barged in, his face red with fury. Marlene followed, clutching her purse like a weapon, her heels clicking sharply against my wooden floor. "Mum," Daniel said through gritted teeth, "what you did was reckless. You have no idea what you've set in motion." I stayed seated in my armchair, cane resting across my lap. "On the contrary," I replied calmly, "I know exactly what I've set in motion. I've protected myself." Marlene threw her purse onto the coffee table, the sound like a gunshot. "Protected yourself? You've embarrassed us. Do you realize how this looks? Our own mother giving power to a child instead of trusting her grown son." I tilted my head, studying her. "If you'd given me reason to trust you, perhaps things would have been different." Daniel stepped closer, looming over me, his hands balled into fists. "We can still fix this. You can revoke it. Jacobs doesn't control you. You can change your mind. Sign the papers, and we can put this mess behind us." My voice stayed steady. "No." That single word cut through the air, sharp and immovable. Daniel's face twisted, his composure unraveling. "Do you even realize how much harder you're making life for everyone? We're trying to help you. You're the one being stubborn." "Help?" I repeated, my tone low. "Help is bringing soup when someone's sick. Help is fixing a leaky roof or calling to check if I need groceries. Help is not stripping someone of their voice while they're still alive." Marlene's cheeks flushed with anger. "Fine. If you won't listen to reason, then don't expect us to be around when things fall apart. Don't expect us to take care of you." I let a small, bitter smile tug at my lips. "You've made it clear you were never here to take care of me. You were here to take care of my assets." They stormed out that night, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the picture frames on the wall. But the storm didn't end at my doorstep. Within days, whispers began circulating through our small town. A friend from church called me, her voice full of curiosity. "Agnes, Is it true you made your grandson your trustee instead of Daniel? By the end of the week, the whispers had become gossip, and the gossip had become sharp-edged stories. At the bakery, I overheard two women talking. Imagine that. Her own son trying to push her into signing everything over. Shameless. Doesn't surprise me. I've seen the way Marlene looks at that house of hers, like it's already hers. The story spread faster than I could have imagined. And the funny thing was, I didn't spread it myself. The witnesses at that dinner, the neighbors Daniel had proudly invited as family friends to see his supposed victory, had done it for me. They'd seen his arrogance crumble, Marlene's shrieks of outrage, and my quiet defiance. People loved a story with a twist, and mine was being told in living rooms and coffee shops all over town. Daniel hated it. He called me once, his voice cold. "You've humiliated us. Do you enjoy making your own children into a laughingstock?" "I never asked you to humiliate yourself," I said softly. "That was your choice." Click. He hung up. But not everyone was angry. One evening, Jacob Jr. came to visit, his backpack still slung over his shoulder from school. He sat on the floor beside my chair, his eyes wide with pride. "Grandma," he whispered, "Dad and Mum are really mad at you. But I think what you did was amazing." I stroked his hair gently. "Do you know what it means, Jacob? What I asked of you?" He nodded fiercely. "It means you trust me, and I won't let you down." For the first time in weeks, tears pricked my eyes. "You're the only one who never made me feel small," I murmured. "That's why I trust you." The fallout had shaken the family to its core. Daniel avoided me. Marlene turned icy at church gatherings, and even some of my relatives sent me sharp words in hushed phone calls. But for every whisper of anger, there were two of admiration. People who told me I had done the right thing. People who said, "I wish I'd been as brave with my own children." The more I heard, the more I realized something. For years, I had been afraid of losing my family's approval. Now that I had lost it, I felt lighter than I ever had. Daniel and Marlene had tried to intimidate me, but instead, they had exposed themselves to everyone else. And as for me, I had nothing left to hide. It was a grey Sunday afternoon when they came. I'd just finished watering the plants in the front window when I saw Daniel's car pull into the driveway. Not just Daniel. His younger brother Peter was with him, and Marlene too, stepping out in her sharp coat as though she were walking into a courtroom. I knew before they even knocked that this was the showdown. I opened the door myself, cane in hand, and stepped aside without a word. They filed in stiffly, their faces drawn tight with determination. Daniel wasted no time. "We need to talk, Mum." I nodded and motioned toward the living room. They sat together on the couch like a united front, while I lowered myself into my armchair opposite them. The space between us felt like a battlefield. Peter spoke first. His voice was quieter than Daniel's, but no less sharp. "Mum, we've been talking. What you did, naming a child, a boy, as your power of attorney, it doesn't make sense. It's reckless. We can't let this stand." Marlene leaned forward, her eyes flashing. "Do you have any idea what people are saying about us? That we're greedy, that we tried to trick you? Do you enjoy making us look like villains?" I rested both hands on my cane, keeping my voice level. "I didn't make you look like villains. Your own actions did that." Daniel's jaw tightened. "This isn't funny, Mum. You don't even understand what you've done." Something in me snapped. "Don't I?" I asked, my voice rising for the first time. I leaned forward, my eyes locked on theirs. "I understand perfectly. I understand that when I was in the hospital, the two of you told a nurse not to let me make my own decisions because I was too old. I understand that when Marlene brought papers to my house, they weren't about help. They were about control. I understand that all of this wasn't about protecting me, but about making sure my years of work, sacrifice, and saving ended up in your hands." Their faces froze, but I didn't stop. Do you know what else I understand? I raised you. I worked nights, cleaned houses, and skipped meals so you could eat. I pawned my wedding ring once just so you could have a new winter coat, Daniel. I sold your father's watch, Peter, to pay your college fees when the scholarship fell through. I've given up more than you'll ever know. I tapped my cane against the floor, the sound sharp in the silence. And this is what I get in return. Not respect, not gratitude, but whispers about me being too old, papers shoved under my nose, plans for my property before I'm even gone. Marlene shifted uncomfortably, her face pale. We didn't mean it like that. Yes, you did. I cut her off. My voice was steel now. You meant every word. You saw me as weak, as disposable, and you thought you could swoop in, take everything, and I'd just smile and let it happen. But you forgot one thing. Daniel's eyes narrowed. And what's that? I straightened in my chair, shoulders back, the years of weight falling away. I am still alive, and as long as I am, my decisions are mine to make. Not yours, not anyone else's. The room went dead silent. Peter looked away, shame flickering across his face. Daniel clenched his fists, his pride wounded, but his rage simmering. Marlene's lips pressed into a thin line, her hands gripping her knees so tightly her knuckles turned white. I softened my tone then, not out of weakness, but out of truth. You know what hurts most? Not the greed, not even the disrespect. What hurts most is realizing that my own children see me as nothing but a wallet with grey hair. That's not what family is supposed to be. I let that sink in, then leaned back in my chair, weary but unbroken. If understanding means signing away my life, then I would rather be a fool. But make no mistake, I am not foolish. I know exactly who I can trust. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Peter stood abruptly, muttering something about needing air. Marlene followed, her heels clacking like gunshots down the hall. Daniel lingered a moment longer, his face a mask of fury and shame, before he turned on his heel and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. I sat there alone in the quiet, the echoes of their footsteps fading. My heart pounded. But it wasn't fear, it was relief. I had said everything I needed to say, and for the first time in years, I felt like my voice had been heard, even if my children were the last ones who wanted to hear it. In the days that followed that final confrontation, the house grew quiet again, but it was a peaceful quiet this time. Not the silence of being ignored or dismissed, but the silence of knowing I had drawn my line and stood firm. Daniel didn't call. Marlene avoided me at church. Even Peter kept his distance. The gossip around town faded into background noise, and I let it. Their shame was theirs to carry, not mine. What mattered was that I had secured my dignity. My choices were still mine, and my future, my legacy, was safe. One evening, Jacob Jr. came over after school. He set his backpack down and pulled out a chessboard we hadn't used in years. "Teach me again, Grandma," he said, his eyes bright. "I want to play like you." We set the pieces up together, my hands steady as I placed each one. He grinned at me. "Dad says I'm too young to understand, but I think I understand plenty." I smiled, my chest warm. "You understand more than most adults, Jacob. That's why I chose you." He didn't need to know the full weight of those words yet. Someday, he would. As we played, I thought about the irony of it all. My children had tried to silence me, to strip me of my choices in the name of help. But in doing so, they had only pushed me to find strength I thought I'd lost. Age doesn't make you less. If anything, it makes you see more clearly. You know who's there out of love and who's there out of greed. You know when to let go and when to fight. That night, as Jacob Jr. toppled my queen with his knight and laughed in triumph, I felt no bitterness, only peace. I looked at him, this boy who still saw me as more than old or frail, And I realized my voice had not been taken, it had been passed forward. And that was something no one, not Daniel, not Marlene, not even time itself, could ever steal. So if anyone ever tells you you're too old to understand, remember this. You might see clearer than they ever will. And your voice, your choices, they still matter. Thank you for listening to my story. Now tell me, where are you watching from tonight?